Medical tourism is a practice of individuals going to other countries for the purpose of privately purchasing healthcare. I chose to look at Cuba from a political, economical, and personal perspective. Medical tourism has been known to offer both promise and dangers to the country, but the impact on our health system in terms of equity and access and availability for the locals are unclear. With Cuba's tropical weather all year round, rich culture, and beautiful sights, it's no wonder that the Cuban economy relies heavily on tourism for the country's revenue. Over the past decade, there has been a tremendous growth in this industry, and where many U.S. medical professionals saw danger, countries like Cuba saw opportunities in the late 1980s. Shortly after the revolution, the Cuban government sought to reach people in rural areas with little to no access to medical services. The government enlisted 750 doctors and medical students to work in the mountains and coastal areas. According to the World Health Organization, today the system in place that keeps healthcare in Cuba free are called polyclinics. Today, Cuba generates earnings by sending 50,000 healthcare workers to more than 60 countries. This helps fund the healthcare system at home, but it is currently aggravating the doctor shortage. Dr. Cristina Luna, a Cuban doctor, is aware that there are challenges to universal healthcare in the island, but the healthcare system must strive to improve quality care as well as integrated services, things that were not a focus post the revolution. Although the government runs the healthcare system, there are many inconsistencies about total universal coverage to the population, as well as preferential treatment for foreigners. I spoke to my cousin, who is in her 5th year of medical school in Cuba, and I asked her to describe the Cuban health system. She said, "The healthcare system in Cuba is disastrous, free, but it will cost you." Shayla further explained to me that even the costliest of procedures are covered, but there are many medications that are extremely expensive and unattainable. Stephanie, my coworker who recently moved here from Cuba, describes her experience with Cuban hospitals as dreadful. When she broke her arm and suffered a mild concussion, she had to wait a day to be treated, and her mother had to go back and forth into town to bring fresh water and toiletries during her stay. Medical tourism directly affects the Cuban people and will continue to affect them if international ties between the U.S. and Cuba keep getting lifted. Soon enough, Americans will be able to travel to Cuba to receive medical care, which will crowd out local facilities and worsen health inequities for the Cuban people. It will also distract local attention from the needs of the public health sector. The mentality is as follows. If you get foreigners to invest into the health system, it will promote even more coverage for the Cuban people and strengthen the public system. As a result, Cuban people do not have the same type of access to healthcare that a tourist willing to pay out of pocket would obtain. Almejeda in Havana, Cuba is one of the biggest and busiest hospitals in all of the island. As you already know, there are many polyclinics scattered through all the island, but very, very few hospitals. Almejeda is a recognized international facility for many foreigners and even those depicted in Michael Moore's film Sickle, where Cuba's healthcare system is falsely advertised as glorious and affordable. Cuban citizens are not given the same treatment, nor are they allowed in the tourist floors of the hospital. In most cases, you must know someone in order to be admitted into Almejeda. The hospital has also been known to accommodate government officials and party leaders from other countries. Samec Hospital in Havana, Cuba, is where communist leader from Venezuela, Chavez, was treated for cancer recently, before his death. About 4 years ago, I personally visited Almejeda Hospital with my aunt, who's a nurse practitioner at that hospital. She works on the 7th floor, which is strictly for Cuban citizens. The appearance, cleanliness, and sterilization has nothing to do with the images depicted in Moore's film. The patient rooms were uninviting, and the operational rooms were completely unhygienic. Tools were scattered all over. Visiting that place gave me an eerie feeling. I named my deliveral piece La Verdad, which translated means the truth. When my group chose medical tourism, I couldn't help but remember the conditions of that 7th floor and the injustice that my family is still going through today. The Cuban people need a voice, but are way too oppressed to voice their concerns because of fear of the government. The painting depicts 2 perspectives to the Cuban healthcare system, all in a monochromatic format. On one side of the painting, you note sterile conditions, vibrant hues of blue, and even light coming from a window that shows the beautiful palm trees of Cuba, an iconic tree of the Caribbean. This is the kind of room that medical tourists and government officials would probably be placed in. On the other hand, you have an eerie, unclean, and dimly lit room. The conditions that are not seen in the image are the kinds of experiences that the Cuban people endure in order to receive health care. They must bring their own buckets of food, water, and toiletries. Sometimes they have to make tremendous lines just to receive health care access. And on top of that, they have to pay for their own medical supplies. Juan Alfonso, a Cuban doctor who left the country for political reasons, states that facilities seen in the movie Sickle are luxurious medical centers that are like five-star hotels, that with the latest technology and even access to the internet. On the other hand, hospitals for ordinary Cubans are falling apart, walls are rotting, and patients have to bring their own bedding. So what happens when you have world leaders promoting a healthcare system that's obviously corrupt? Take, for example, World Health Organization Director General Margaret Chan. She was praising the Cuban healthcare system and calling on all other countries to follow the Cuban example. Should we simply accept these claims and stand idle? Certainly not. Cuban officials cling on to post-revolutionary ideals and claim that healthcare in Cuba is free and universal, a fundamental right which is guaranteed by the state. Should we also imitate an ineffective healthcare system based on communist propaganda that the people come first? Because they certainly don't, not in Cuba. After a year of renewed diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba, Americans are visiting the island, businesses are making their way into the Cuban market, and both countries are expanding cultural and educational exchanges. Obama's administration has allowed more trade and travel in order to empower Cuban citizens to fight for democratic change. Within that empowerment, I hope that the new wave of American tourists entering the island are aware of the experiences that a Cuban citizen might encounter in a health facility versus that a tourist or a government official would encounter. Medicine should not come down to politics, nor money, and should always be given without any kind of discrimination. It's been said that Cubans live like the poor and die like the rich, a reference to their economic state and the fact that the population is living longer and aging well. I hope to encounter a Cuba one day where the Cuban people are treated justly, have opportunity to prosper in their own countries, and can still die like the rich. That's the Cuba I want.